everybody. We're experimenting with video today here on the Fractional Forum. Welcome to the show, everyone. For those of you who did not get a chance to check out our very first episode last week on the Fractional Forum, what we're doing here is we're just having some big conversations. It's those conversations that seem to open a can of worms in your organization. Why? Probably because they touch multiple areas of the organization. So as you might be able, if you're watching us live and you're watching us on video, what you can probably see is that there's a whole bunch of people in this room that have different expertise. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking an actual business problem and we're going to talk about it. We are not going to solve it in an hour because I don't think any of us believe that complex problems can be solved in an hour, but we can open the door to solutions. So this is what we're going to be doing today. And for those of you who are watching us live, I want to encourage you to get into the conversation as well. There is a very cool chat functionality that will allow you to get into the conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your perspectives, your insights. So please feel free to get into that conversation as well today. So we're going to start off by reading a somewhat complex business problem. Is everybody ready for that? Panel? Mostly panel. I mean, viewers.
Absolutely.
Can I just chime in and say, is any problem not complex, Tracy?
I mean, you know what? I'm just going to quickly say from the marketing perspective, I think a lot of times people are sold that problems are very simple and that all you need is this marketing automation and it will solve all of your problems. But at the end of the day, no, I don't think any problem is not complex. And when we pretend that it's simple and then we get a simple solution, and then especially if the simple solution doesn't end up fixing the problem, probably this is something that's a little bit bigger and worth a conversation with diverse perspectives, because one of the things I found interesting about these conversations is there's not really a clear root cause, right? Like, even though we're all representing different kind of departments, it hasn't yet been this is an HR problem, right? Like, just take this HR and run with it and fix it. No, there's a lot of interactivity that happens between all of the arenas. So I don't know. Did I answer your question? Let's just pretend, for sake of this show, that all problems are complex. But I will tell you, the one we are going to go through today is not complex. So let's be prepared to get complex today, folks. Okay. So we have a submission from a CEO and founder. It's a small business with 45 employees in the custom manufacturing industry. So here's what they've shared from a business challenge perspective. The challenge, we lost Tim. Oh, get him back when he's back. Tim already knows the challenge, I guess.
There's no sales challenges involved. So he's on this
sales
one.
is never a problem.
Complex enough.
I was going to say he must have gotten a sales call, because as we all know, sales responds within 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, set the tone there, Tim. Okay, so anyway, back to the business challenge. The challenge I'd like the Fractional Forum to tackle is our struggle to scale sustainably due to operational inefficiencies and misalignment between teams. So first of all, let's just take that as an assumption. Specifically, we've had difficulties in managing project timelines, balancing workloads across departments, and maintaining consistency in delivering on our customer promises. There's a clear gap between sales commitments and what operations can realistically deliver, which is creating tension internally and disappointing our customers externally. So they've also shared some impacts on the business and their own personal well-being as the CEO and founder. It says this issue is leading to bottlenecks in production, higher than average employee turnover, and a decline in customer satisfaction ratings. Personally, it's taking a toll. I'm constantly stepping into day-to-day operations to put out fires, which means I have little time to focus on strategic growth or even my personal life. It feels like we're running in circles rather than moving forward. We've tried a few things, such as implementing a new project management tool and hosting weekly team syncs to improve communication. The project management tool helped marginally, but wasn't adopted fully across teams. I don't know if anybody's heard of that happening before. That's totally uncommon, right, Keith?
Yeah, first time that's happened.
Yeah. The weekly syncs highlighted some issues, but lacked actionable follow-ups and accountability. So the same problems keep resurfacing. A big part of our challenge is that we lack cross-functional collaboration. Oh, this is like made for this show. Sales, operations, and finance often seem to operate in silos. I also don't think any of us would say that that is uncommon. With each team focusing solely on their own KPIs rather than a shared vision, I suspect there's also a deeper issue with how we define and measure success as a company, but I can't pinpoint it. I'm looking for practical, actionable strategies that address both the tactical and cultural aspects of this problem. I'm also curious about what benchmarks or metrics we should track to ensure alignment as we scale. Does this give you enough context?
How much time do we have?
I know, right? This is only an hour-long show.
I was going to say, we will focus on this issue until Christmas. Thank you to the CEO who has very kindly given us their burning issue. I want to go first. So go back to the very first sentence or second sentence. Misalignment, everything, silos, the bottlenecks, the PM tool, the lack of adoption, everything goes back to misalignment. So, Vered, this is what I'm feeling in some of the organizations I'm working within. Well, it's great to have a vision. It's great to have a mission, a BHAG, whatever, depending on, your influences, what you're calling it. But alignment comes through values, because values are like where things start to become actioned. So I mean, I would start at that conversation, and I don't mean like sit there and be like, let's go through the values on our wall, but is everyone aligned on the way they should be working or could be working? And does everyone want to even do this in the first place? Like, I mean, we all want to scale, because why do we want to scale? Because we want a larger impact, right? Me as a person, as one, I'm going to have less of an impact than if I have 10 people aligned behind me, right? You amplify. That's what we're doing here. Amplification by 6, right? So if you're not, you have to have an intention and then focus, but it's all through alignment. So there's my, that's my grade. That's the first thing I wrote down on my Post-its, like misalignment. So maybe I'll start that off.
I 100% agree. I think that's exactly where I would start off. Like foundationally, when you're starting any sort of HR strategy, you're looking at, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this organization? What are the skills that we're looking for in every single person we bring through the door? And what are our commitments to each other and to our customers? They have to align. And when we're actually going into an engagement with my organization, one of the first things that we do is we actually speak with every leader. And we drill down into, what do they think the purpose is of this organization? And that's the first thing that we tackle. If there is misalignment in the vision, it is the first thing that we tackle, because every leader needs to have vision alignment to be able to cascade that to the rest of their teams.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things this makes me think, it's funny because I actually referenced it on my Crazy Stupid Marketing show yesterday too, is that alignment on what we're doing here. And not because every single participant in the organization is doing the exact same thing, but everybody knows why I come to work in the morning. So when you ask the janitor at NASA in the 60s what they're doing, we're putting a man on the moon. That's what we're doing. This is what we do here. And I might clean the floors and clean the toilets, but we are putting a man on the moon. And I think this is something that I think it's something that is always there from an underlying perspective. And we have these actions to like create vision and mission and put it on our website and put it on our wall and put the values on our wall and make sure our employees memorize the values. But I feel like there's a breakdown in the like livedness of it. So like, I know all of us, I'm sure, have experienced this concept of misalignment. So I'm wondering from a like lived values or lived actions perspective, if anybody has thoughts on how we can make progress on that, because I think a lot of the literature, I used air quotes for people who are just listening, the literature tells us to do the things and people have done the things, but yet it's still not living in the organization. So, Carolyn, you keep getting closer and closer to the camera.
I do, because I think money talks, right? And so that I think is part of the thing that's disconnected there. So they kind of mentioned KPIs, but if you really think of that misalignment there, look, they have 45 people working at the company. They're employees. They're not volunteers. And I bet if you were to actually look at what they're rewarded based on, the salespeople probably have absolutely no financial incentive to be providing a notice with operations and capacity planning with operations. So one of the things that's really tricky with a company is, are you going to pay people based on their individual performance? It sounds like the founder of the company really wants the company to be scaling and growing their bottom line collectively. And it doesn't really sound, when there's misalignment, I usually look at the money and kind of say, do you actually reward the operations people based on that? Do you reward the sales people based on just the sales that they actually close, or based on the actual, is there anything linking their compensation to the company-wide success? And I think money is really where I end up looking to kind of say, we talk about these values, we talk about this mission, but if you're fundamentally going to pay people in a way that is misaligned, I think it's magical thinking to think that that people are somehow going to behave in a significantly different way. Now, I bet Tim is going to have some thoughts on this, so I'm really curious to hear from him in a second here. And I don't think it's necessarily like an easy formula to go through, though, because fundamentally it kind of goes back to, like, remember school days where you'd have a group project and, you all get the same grade, and it's like, well, what do you do when someone else isn't kind of carrying their weight? And that's what can happen in a company too, is like where you want everyone to be aligned to a common, what we call EBITDA goal, or kind of like a bottom line goal. And we want some of that to be part of people's compensation. It becomes the, like, what do you do with the departments that are maybe not kind of pulling their weight, or you perceive as not pulling your weight? But before diving in, I'm definitely curious to hear, Tim, because I bet that you've got definitely some thoughts around a lot of these different sales pieces too.
Well, can I just add one thing? And that is, Carolyn, you are like our favorite type of person in finance from an HR perspective. Compensation should be tied to the behaviors that you want to see in your organization. So thank you.
Exactly. 100%. We are aligned.
We're aligned here too in sales. And that's really important to make sure that you have that alignment on compensation, on performance. And so that there's a vested interest in sales to make sure that we can deliver. And there's a vested interest in delivery in whatever form that takes in the organization in sales. And some of that alignment that Lindsay talked about, I think about silos, and sometimes we just refer to sales as this nebulous, nameless, faceless group, or operations as this nameless, faceless group. And that drives me nuts when I go into organizations and they say that, right? Like, do you guys know each other? Have you gone out for a beer or a coffee? Have you sat down and just talked about life? And sometimes breaking down some of those barriers on a personal level leads then to creating alignment. I think one of the things I see here is this is very much an organization that's on a growth curve. You need to break down those barriers and create alignment by creating more collaborative meetings. So get sales in the project planning meeting, get somebody from project in the sales planning meetings. Sales job is to get out there and create capacity problems to bring in more work than we can do so the organization can grow, but we also need to be able to deliver on our promises. So we just need to make sure that we're aligned, and flexibility is going to be really important in a small organization like this, where sometimes customer problems will just create some things. We need to shift some things around. The shell game, I like to call it, right, is sometimes you just got to move things around so we can get this deal done, because strategically it's the most important one. But that starts with breaking down the silos, getting people talking to each other, understanding the challenges that they're facing, and talking. And that will create some of that alignment through the values that Lindsay and Baird started talking about.
I love what you're saying there, Tim. Like, I think that it all comes back to the people, right? And I think those relationships are so important. And, inherently, I believe that there is a little bit of friction sometimes, to that point that you talked about, between sales and operations. I once had an operations leader I worked with that challenged me, or challenged the sales leader of our organization to say, okay, I want you to make me as busy and uncomfortable as possible. And it was kind of a fun back and forth. But I think that if one piece is missing, which is the alignment, or also the trust, and building genuine relationships, so that when that push and pull happens, it comes from a place of trust, it comes from a place of empathy, it comes from a place where each party knows what the other one's doing, or each group knows what the other one's doing. I think that it can be a successful tension and a positive tension versus something that might become a little more hostile when things start to go sideways, or when that friction comes up. Like, would you agree with that, Tim?
I do. And when that friction comes up, I always look at, what can I do different in that situation? And so when my sales teams would complain to me about something operations did, one of the first things I would look at is, did we do everything we should have and we could have? Did we set them up for success? And so it would drive them nuts. And I would go to operations and have that dialogue, but I'd always be open to, what can we do different to make this better? And that's important when that tension rises up, is that both parties come with that attitude of, we're in this stuff together. How are we going to be able to make this situation better and get a better result? And so we got to be able to both make adjustments and changes to how we're doing things.
I want to chime in. Sorry, go ahead. I just want to chime in because, of course, operations is being pulled in on this discussion, and a couple things popped up to me, and sales and operations are always in hot water together. But this is what I'm going to say, because I believe that, like, the lines between personal life and professional life are like really blurred nowadays. I've been married to a sales guy for 24 years. So guess what? We are aligned on our vision. We disagree often on, like, how to parent, how to spend our money, how to do certain things, but we are aligned on the end goal. That is one thing that we always circle back to, is alignment. So if I go back to, I think what Carolyn was saying about, like, so there's two sides. There's accountability, and then also, like, compensation. So is there accountability, and then also, like, rewards or compensation that would cultivate collaboration, right? So if sales and operations are working together, what is a shared goal that sales and operations can have? Could it be project profitability, right? Like, that could be something. If a salesperson is undercutting a job and then operations can't succeed, then is that a shared responsibility? I would say so. Like, so profitability could be part of that. Client satisfaction, churn rate, that's the thing. An operations person is also a salesperson. I always say this because all of Tim's work is going to be flushed down the toilet if we can't actually deliver on the project or the operations, right? Depending on what type of company you are. So that was the only thing I wanted to say. Like, there's always that tension, but it elevates you. Like, it's not a bad thing, but you need to have a safe workplace in order to do that. So if we are 6 leaders at that boardroom table where they said, this is our 2024 goal. We want to grow. So they use the word sustainable. So with sustainable, we think responsible, right? So that's well-intentioned. So right out of the gate, to me, that says that, like, it's from a good intention place. So if 6 of us are sitting at that table, are we walking out of that meeting completely aligned? Have we all been super, super honest with things that we think, will be issues in getting there? Has everyone had the opportunity to advocate for their teams, their accountabilities that they're working on? Because, I mean, it doesn't matter what book, EOS, scaling up, you walk out of that boardroom, you need to be aligned, but it can't be forced. right? Because then what happens? You have side conversations. You have, what do they call it? Like end runs, I think they call it in EOS, but you have a meeting after the meeting. That shouldn't happen. Those are red flags. So just wanted to say that, like, are your 6 executives, 4 leaders, whatever, are they aligned? And then are they able to properly advocate for their departments?
Well, and I think that also might lead back to the initial question, almost like leading the witness a tiny bit in terms of those KPIs that the person asking the question was asking for. Where I'm a big believer, and I'm curious on all your opinion on having central KPIs that aren't department specific but are organizational guiding lights, right? Like I worked with an airline for a while. I won't name the airline, but their big guiding light was revenue per seat miles, and so the entire organization could see how every activity that they did fit into either adjusting that metric up or adjusting that metric down, whether it be technology, whether it be HR, whether it be ops. I think that the ability to see how your work impacts that metric and then have the organization rally around a metric is really important.
Yeah, and I think too, like, collaboration is the thing that I keep coming back to, right? But then there's also, I feel like that's an area where, like, one, there's infinite collaboration technology, quote unquote, solutions, which I think a lot of people, and even in this example, I said, like, they've tried a project management software. It kind of helped, but not really. I just, like, I'm feeling very strongly that these underlying things that like it meant that the submission mentioned culture at the end, cultural aspects of this problem. And I just feel like, one, culture maybe feels scary for people to get into because the culture of the organization is the culture of the organization. And Vered, I'd love to hear your perspective on, like, the ability to change a culture versus change some of the other things that we've talked about, metrics, collaboration, principles, and those types of things. But I still feel like these are, like, there's a layer to go down here to find that opportunity for collaboration, that opportunity for alignment. So Vered, do you want to talk a little bit about culture?
Yeah, so I think that some of the things that came up for me when I was listening to this problem is when I hear about people working in silos, that's a flag for me that they've lost sight of what they're actually doing. They have their blinders up. They're working on the things that they know that they need to do within their little job description, but they're not actually thinking about the impact of what they're doing. There's a missing link there. And the telltale signs of that are quality is reduced, the customer experience, which very much, customer experience and employee experience are completely connected. We're hearing turnover. And so that's a sign for me that there's something missing. And I would actually go back to leadership. Do you have the right people that are leading this organization? Do you have the right organizational design? Where is customer experience in all of this? If this is something that's really important for this manufacturing company, that customer experience, where's that department? Maybe they need to create a department so that there's connection, that there's someone who is taking care of that customer experience. Because I'll tell you, if that's something that's really important for that organization to be able to scale sustainably, then create a priority in your organization, invest in that department, invest in the customer experience, invest in the employee experience.
I think the only thing I would say with that, Vered, not that I totally agree, but is that creating, another silo, right? So then you have someone who's in their own silo, like, advocating for the customer. It absolutely needs to be at the forefront of everything because we have a PM tool, I'm going to guess, that was likely brought in because the client wants certainty. They want, clarity to what's coming, deadlines, like to be able to communicate effectively. But at the end of the day, Like everyone needs to be working together. And so while customer experience is super, super important, because what do they say? We all need to fall in love with the problem we're solving, right? The person, that has the problem, right? We need to, did I say that right? I feel like I got that wrong.
No, I think that is right.
It works.
That's
Like,
right.
we're solving problems for people on the day-to-day. We need to fall in love with solving that problem.
But we become I wrote this in my notebook a few weeks ago, and I've been thinking I need to write like content about this because I see it all the time. We start a business because we see, an obstacle, and we're like, through a problem becomes an opportunity, right? That's why we're all here. That's why, we hopefully we have, viewers listening because they are solving a problem. Eventually you become the victim of your own success, and you're solving your inside your business problems. So like, you, at the beginning when you start a business, I think we all know so many business fail. Like, what do they say? Like 2 in like 10 succeed. And of the businesses that fail, quite often it is that like idea that you are doing a certain thing and you fall in love with it and you don't validate it. So what customer experience does is they validate that you're still on track to the problem that you're solving, right? That customer experience just like reinforces that. They come to the table and they're accountable to like ensure that you haven't lost, sight of that original intention to the problem that you are actually solving. So, I mean, that like, while it's super important, it can't be off the table if we haven't actually figured out how to work together. That's just another person at the table who is presenting, their very siloed thing.
Well,
we do have someone watching who is saying you are making good points, Lindsay.
It's probably my husband. Just kidding.
It's a mystery LinkedIn user.
He would be mystery.
Being like, good point, Sylph.
Yeah, it's my AI, which I've named today Clint, as you all know. Totally joking.
If we're able to break down those silos and have that customer experience role in whatever form it takes, to Vera's point, it really makes sure that we're doing things consistently from front to back. And in many organizations, small, big, doesn't matter, you're so dependent on an individual's efforts to do that customer experience, to create that great situation. Then you create inconsistency because I might be dealing with somebody different, or it might be a squeaky wheel getting some grease. But the customer experience role is so important to just making sure we have those consistent customer touch points so that the problem that we're trying to solve, we solve the same way. And they can tell their friends, this is what to expect when you're dealing with the the company. And so that customer experience is so important. I think this organization needs to just take a look at that from the first conversations and building relationship to project delivery to winning the next project, making sure that we have some consistency there.
I think I agree as well, Tim. Like, I think that that consistency is going to be super important. I think one thing we haven't touched on yet, which I've probably been dying over here going mute and unmute to jump in around, is that technology piece as well. I know that in the question they mentioned, they went out, they bought this software, they bought this fancy PM tool, hoping it would solve their problems. And I believe that they are not alone in this. There's a lot of organizations that think technology will solve some sort of underlying problem they have. And I think the thing that Barrett said right off the bat, clarity, is incredibly important still. And before they went out and bought this PM tool, I think that, technology doesn't solve a bad process. Technology doesn't solve a lack of clarity, and layering on technology can actually even amplify those problems sometimes. And we see this all the time in companies where if they don't have solid foundations and fundamentals, layering on technology actually brings people further apart versus closer together. And that could be everything from their collaboration tools to their PM tools to the fancy new AI bot named Clint. I think that the opportunity to take a step back, look at the underlying foundation, add that clarity before implementing these tools is really important. I don't know if anyone has other perspectives on this, but the technology piece, I look at it as actually making the problem worse at this point versus doing any favors to the organization.
Well, one of the things, so all of the things that everyone is talking about, have you guys read this book, The Discipline of Teams?
No, it looks interesting though.
Highly recommend. So it's by John R. Katzenbach and Douglas K. Smith. It posits that there are two disciplines that a company needs to be able to master in order to like make collaboration and all of these things productive for them. One is the single leader discipline, which is by default what most organizations run on. I'm the single leader. I delegate things. You do the things. Everything rolls up to me. And there are some things that work with that methodology. And then there's the real team discipline, which is not a single leader. It's based on a core team of people doing things. And there's like shared work products, shared metrics, shared all of the things. And as everybody is talking about all these different like perspectives, it just is making me feel like there is an issue here. And so like anytime there's a silo, I feel like that is single leader discipline, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're saying, I can tell you what to do and you will do the thing and that will work. We will just do that. And we kind of touched on this last week in terms of, because last week the problem was framed more as an HR issue. And one of the things we talked about was that like, well, if we're just like, hey, HR, go deal with that, right? Like, and come back later and tell us that everything is sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't work that way because HR is connected to other things. HR is responsible for the people. The people work in all of the departments. It's innately connected to each other. And so what I keep thinking is that like, well, how do we break down this like single leader discipline when it's not working? Right? So I'm not saying like I'm a marketing leader, right? Sometimes I need someone to go and do a marketing thing. I need you to go and post on social media. I need you to go run this event. I need you to go send out an email. Sometimes there's things that work and the single leader discipline works well for that. But when we're talking about all of these like interconnected, misaligned inefficiencies, right? By nature, we've said it lots of times already, break down the silos. Break down the silos. But breaking down the silos requires us to not look at this from a single leader discipline perspective. It requires us to look at it from a real team perspective. So I'm not now the CEO and I'm the one with all of these problems and I have to delegate fixes to the problem. We are solving the problem. How are we solving the problem? And I think this is a conversation that isn't often being had in these scenarios. I'd love to get Carolyn's perspective because she's been backstage for a while.
My connection's been kind of coming in and out a little bit there, but no, like I think I really see, like we think about all the different themes that we've heard about, right? From like the single leader discipline to the culture, to the silos, to the customer problems. All of those things are really symptoms of not having a shared scorecard, right? It seems like it's almost the equivalent of a bunch of kids playing soccer, but not on the same team, right? They're running in different directions. So when I think of KPIs, I really think of them in two different aspects. I think of them as the lagging indicators. So that's going to be the bottom line financials, right? And that's going to take a little while to actually show some of the symptoms. We've heard some really major red flags that customers are not happy with what they're getting on this company or what they're necessarily getting from all of those products. And that's going to show up in your financials, but that's going to be a very lagging indicator, right? That's going to tell you what's happening when it's a little too late. And what I think this company is really missing is what we call leading indicators. So any KPI you put in place can either be categorized as leading or lagging. And the financials are typically lagging. And that's when it's a little too late. And where I think this company could get a lot of benefit is really deciding what are those leading indicators that they're going to say is the most important. And maybe that's going to be customer satisfaction. Maybe that's actually going to be collaboration to break down some of those silos, but really getting intentional, getting everyone around the room and saying, you know what, we need to choose 3 leading indicators that are really going to help us all come together, look at the same scorecard, and those leading indicators are what's going to be impacting your financials in a lagging aspect, right? And it's not that it's still a choice. You still have to prioritize, right? You could very easily, from everything we discussed here, you could come up with a list of 20 leading indicators. So you really have to still make some different choices on it. But I think that could make a really big impact on this company's bring everyone together and then decide what are going to be your three leading indicators to start making some progress on some of these aspects.
I really like what you said there, Carolyn, about that. And one of the most powerful implementations I saw of that was when people sat around and said, here's the big hairy goal that we're trying to achieve, the BHAG, the big hairy audacious goal. And the teams would come up with their bet. If we do this, we're going to impact that BHAG goal. And so they came up with the leading indicators of what they were going to do to help impact that. And there was that buy-in. And they just made sure that they did everything they could on those leading indicators to achieve the BHAG. And they create this particular one, they created a whole bunch of awesome scorecards to keep score. There was Lego structures, there was beautiful scorecards. Like, they bought in 100% to this because it was the team buying into the process. And this is the metric we came up with. This is what we are going to do to make that big, hairy, audacious goal possible. Lindsay, I think you were trying to chime in.
I was worried that we were going to get I was worried we were going to get too far away from my the thing I wanted to talk about. But thank you, Tim. You kind of kept us there. So Good. There's two things. The numbers. So I was going to say I wholeheartedly agree. And I worked for an organization, and one thing we did super, super, super well was had this mantra: everybody has a number. So in the book Traction, there is a whole chapter on this, and it talks about the example is that, I think it was like a shift of like welding pipe or something like that, and there was 2 shifts, 24 hours. So then that shift comes, so that at the beginning of the shift, the leader says, how many lines of pipe do you think you can weld? The team said 50. Okay, so they wrote 50 on the floor. So then all day or all night, whatever shift they were, they saw that 50 and they all counted towards it. These are frontline, employees. So they all counted. So then guess what happened? The next shift came in and the next shift saw the 50 on the floor. But in fact, the 50 was actually 52, because what that did was that cultivated alignment between that entire team working towards that 50. So then that 50, maybe they got 55. The next crew came in and said, what's that? And the leader said, because that leader was aligned to the other shift leader, that said, oh, guess what it is? It's this, articulated that. Guess what? The team went up to 60 or 65, and it went on and on. So numbers are one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of point back to, by doing that, we're creating future leaders. As a leader, you need to create future leaders, right? Like, that is your goal, is to work yourself out of a job. And how do you do that? By creating future leaders, accountable individuals, good problem solving. You want them all to work together. The same organization that we had all of these numbers, which was fabulous, there was a leader who I constantly saw running between teams and departments, solving the problems. And I said to this person, I said, well, why are you doing that? Well, that's my job. And I was like, no, it's not actually. Like, your job is to actually teach them how to solve the problems. So if that department needs that department to work together to solve the problem, you are forcing the silo by running in between. And this individual also felt like she was completely overwhelmed, didn't have enough time. So it's like, let's remove that. So what do? You have to coach the conversation. You have to bring the two individuals together. You create the space for them. You start to, facilitate. And all of a sudden, you notice that person from that department walks by your office to the other office. They don't stop at your door anymore. Pretty soon you don't have a lineup out the door. And then the good news is, what do you get to do? Focus on strategy, vision, mission, impact, the big things we all love. So the power of like everyone has a number, and like you said, Tim, like the whole team and Carolyn, like they're all aligned. They're aligned on that one number, and everyone was actually part of that. It was super powerful.
And I just want to kind of double down on the everyone has a number, not everyone has like 45 numbers, because because I think one of the things that we see a lot too, like from a technology standpoint, there's an opportunity to create dashboard slots, and you'll get these dashboard requests sometimes that they're like 4 pages long, and there's 5 other dashboards behind them, and I think that sometimes people look at the data behind it as a whole, here's all the things that we can do, but those can actually, once again, create more confusion if there's not alignment around, what is our guiding light? What is the number that everyone has? Or what are the 3 numbers? But it's not everyone has, here's the 4 dashboards that we have up on our wall that we pay attention to every single metric all the time. It's just impossible. And I think to maybe loop back some of the clarity that could come from having those KPIs and having those guiding lights back to how that could actually impact some of the other deployments from a technology standpoint, from a software, from a tools perspective. You can then all start to map out the processes and activities that lead in to contributing to that number, and then you can start to apply, well, how do these tools actually make an impact on these? Do they make sense, and are they getting us closer to that or further away from it? And then how do we actually put in place the legwork to support that goal versus just have a broad tool that kind of vaguely lines up with the problem that we have?
Keith, I'm so glad you brought up the number, because I see that all the time in accounting too, right? Where it's so many different KPIs, and really the number is 7 plus or minus 2. So there's some really interesting brain science that's been done, and the working capital, I'm the finance person. The working memory has been really studied. And if you think about our brains, right? Our brains go way back to like back on the desert savanna time. Our brains haven't evolved that much. And when researchers have studied the brain, the maximum that you can actually focus on is 7, and they found some people that can do plus or minus 2, so between 5 to 9. So if you're looking at a dashboard and you've got 10 items on it, you've got to start slashing, because if you don't, all of the metrics just end up that people are no longer paying attention to any of them. So I think really like it's hard to really put a line in the sand to say like you can't exceed a certain number, but really if you're exceeding 9 metrics under there, you're diluting the impact of each and every single one as you go to 10, 11. And like you said, you see companies that go all the way up until 40, and it's like you have 40 priorities, you don't have any priorities. So yeah.
So I want to ask Vered this because I don't know the answer. So Carolyn, you said 7 to 9, and there's a magical thing about numbers. I have heard, read, been told that there is the same thing when it comes to leading teams, that there is like a ideal number for a leader to the amount of individuals on their team in order to be successful as well.
I would agree. I don't think I have read current literature on it, but I have observed, and I would say the maximum would be 8.
So the people who have told me they have a team of 150 people is maybe a little bit too big.
Well, of direct reports, absolutely.
I know I heard that once, and I was like, right? What?
Yeah, you're going to have a VP that maybe has indirect reports of 150. But you shouldn't have more than 8. And I would say even that is a lot.
It's probably a human tied back to accountability, right? Like our innate capacity of humans, this goes back to capacity, the numbers as far as like if you're actually accountable for 45 numbers, are you actually accountable? Like when everything's important, nothing is. So yeah, probably the same thing.
To my original statement around like, well, why are we doing this? Like, what is that North Star? What are we in business for? Really, everything that you are building in your organization should always tie back to that. And you should question, well, is this connected to our true purpose? Simon Sinek's your why.
This is like one of my favorite chapters in the book, The One Thing. And it talks about priorities. and how priorities is not a thing. Priority is one. There's one priority. And at the end of the day, even if you had a list of quote unquote priorities, one of them is going to be more important than the other ones. And I think this is another like alignment piece I see, is that like, let's say as a team perspective, we say we have these 7 priorities because we listened to Carolyn, and Carolyn said we can't have more than 7. So we're going to choose 7. We have these 7 priorities for 2025. But Vered has one of those as her top priority, and Keith has a different one as his top priority, and Carolyn has a different one as her top priority. And now all of a sudden we don't have one priority anymore. Everybody, every department, we've now created these silos again, where we're going to go and we're going to do this. And it's part of the puzzle, but it's not really like putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And I just want to say this quickly, also because it came up in a conversation yesterday, and Carolyn, you mentioned it in your like leading indicators. Customer satisfaction is also a lagging indicator. It's an indicator of what you already did. And so if you're talking about customer satisfaction surveys, NPS scores, these types of things, they are lagging indicators. They are not leading indicators. So just because I thought that was a really good idea, Carolyn shared, get some leading indicators, just customer service isn't one of them, so don't choose that one. But
I think, can I just,
so is it to get, like we talk about North Stars. I've heard companies I've worked with say North Star, but then I've also seen it vary. I mean, especially from a marketing perspective, right? Like my job as a marketer is to align all the efforts with the North Star. This is where we want to go. But a lot of the stuff that gets done on a day-to-day basis isn't in alignment with that. So is that actually our North Star, or is something else?
I think that's a good question. I just want to circle back to, like, if we talk about, so we get all these books and we have all these methodologies, but let's talk about how to like operationalize something. So it's great that you have that like vision, and that's your big goal. And a BHAG, it's like way out there, right? Or moonshot, whatever you want to call it. You got to break it down. So Tracy, like Keith has a priority, Carolyn has a priority, Vered has a priority, Tim, Lindsay, we all have our own priorities. They have to intermingle to fuel up to that larger priority, right? So you've taken that big moonshot, that big goal, and you break it down. You know, I'm a project manager. We call that a work breakdown structure. It's actually not that complicated. You put the thing at the top, you get a board, post-it notes, and you put it all. So that's how the priorities happen. They happen in a collaborative environment. So yes, while there may be a scorecard that has 45 things, one person can only be accountable for 3, right? That is their focus, but the focus needs to be aligned with the larger focus. That's
and the numbers need to be aligned with each other. So like if I've got 3 numbers I'm responsible for, but one is in direct conflict with another one, then I can't actually deliver on all 3 of those because they are butting heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, okay, you guys, I really want to ask this question because I've been sitting on it for a while. But like, I want to hear how everybody feels about how ego plays into these things, because I feel like a lot of times, and it's very it's common in like corporate infrastructure that we are like moving into, and I think the concept of it and the beingness is something that people want to start moving away from. But I do still think that there's a lot of these things that end up being ego driven. And so like Keith, I'm actually like, what I'm thinking of predominantly from this use case is that we have this project management tool. We got this project management tool. It doesn't work for us, but we're going to stick with it because it's the thing that we chose. And while I'm not a big fan, like especially from a marketing perspective, like flip-flopping on things like every 30 days, like what's the difference between like being committed to a thing and like being egotistical about a thing?
Yeah, no, and I think that there's a whole bunch of science that supports this too around people hate. People will do a lot of weird things to avoid feeling like they've lost something. And so, people will make decisions, and I believe this very strongly, with the best information that they believe they have at the time. And they might arrive at a point 6 months down the line and be like, oh, like crap, like I really wish I didn't make that decision. But I guess we're here now. And they'll continue sinking money and people and time and all of these things into decisions they made in the past that no longer fit their organization, because they wish that something were different, but they can't turn around, because then they'll lose the 6 months they've had in there. They'll lose the investment they made in the licensing or whatever that may be. Or even, I think from a pure ego perspective, they will be afraid that they'll look like they made the wrong decision to their team, and they're afraid to be vulnerable on that front. And so I think that one of the things that we also, from a technology perspective, have to really help people do is decouple themselves from the decisions they made in the past. I think we have to acknowledge that people make decisions with the best information they have at the time, but it's okay to move forward. And these are sometimes the things that are holding them back. And, in the case of the CEO, the project management tool, I don't think is the problem. I think that I would recommend taking a couple steps back, mapping out some of the process, making sure we have some clarity and some goals and everything beforehand. But I think that you can salvage the tool by getting some of that clarity in front. But I think that the ego piece sometimes, to your point, will just really hold people back from facing those hard truths, and that'll be the thing that slows it down. The other thing that I do want to mention on ego is that if you think about the rest of the team, I also believe that people want to do a good job every day. And if they don't have clarity, if you think about their teams that are contributing to them, they don't have clarity. If they can't go home to their families and say, hey, you know what, like I delivered X, Y, and Z. If they don't have that clarity of what is a good job or what is a bad job, then their ego, from just a personal satisfaction standpoint, is also being damaged each day they go into work, because they don't know if they're doing awesome or not. So that's my perspective. I don't know, Tim, if you wanted to jump in there. I saw you
for
off
sure.
mute, so yeah.
So what I've seen happen sometimes is when that problem exists and you choose, or somebody above them chooses to go a different direction, the ego comes up again, because now we look at it and go, oh, we tried that once, it didn't work. And so to be able to critically look at it and go, what did we learn from that situation? Sometimes is looking internally and go, what didn't I do right? Or what didn't we do right in that situation? So that we can look at it and go, what did we learn? Because this organization probably needs some kind of project management tool. Maybe the way they're using it right now isn't the right one. Maybe it's not the right one, but they can't say, throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we tried that once, it didn't work. And so really need to take a look at it and go, what are we learning from this situation? And what do we need to do? Maybe we just need to look at the people problem. It's a communication problem that they're trying to solve with technology, like you said very early on. Maybe it just in the wrong setup, or maybe it's the wrong tool completely. But look at the situation and go, what are we learning from this? And just be willing to put that ego aside and go, we made some mistakes. Let's fix it. Let's move forward with something that benefits everyone.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly hop in there because it's making me think of all of the CRM integrations that I've seen happen in my day. And like how a lot of times I worked for one company that had 3 different CRM systems in my tenure there. Yeah. I don't know if everyone's watching, but you should see Tim's face. It's not a good one. The problem isn't the technology, right? The problem is like, we don't know how we're supposed to use it. We don't have there's an underlying issue. And this is something I think specifically I've seen in marketing keeps people very surface level, right? Well, I just need to do more posts. I just need to use this channel. I just need to this. And like almost never is that the solution. It's something underneath. We have to look at this from a people perspective, from a systems perspective, from a values perspective. We need to go deeper. And it would be great. We kind of opened the show with this. It'd be great if it was as easy as signing up for an email service provider and then all of your problems were solved. But it's just not how it works. And I get frustrated on the daily because people are out in the world implementing quick marketing fixes. I used air quotes again. they're not quick. They're not fixing anything. They are doing stuff, but like if you were actually tracking that stuff against your moonshot, your BHAG, your North Star, not contributing, folks. So like, let's just, and this is where I always come to, like, let's just, okay, we tried it. It didn't, we realized it's not connecting to this. Like, let's let it go. If we are really committed to that North Star, let's go get that. And let's forget what we tried that didn't work. Anyway.
So project management software, CRMs, they're a solution, right? Fractional executives, they're a solution. Again, like we all created companies because we have a unique way to solve a problem. I think individuals, so this ties into ego, and there's also, I think, an undertone here of power, but let's just stick with ego. Certain individuals, what is preventing them, as like them being person, company, is their inability to actually get to the inability and willingness to actually get to the root cause of the problems. So, you know, Asana could be the perfect tool for that organization. Salesforce could be the perfect tool for that other organization. Carolyn could be the perfect solution. But have they actually gotten to the root cause of the problem? And why does that tie into ego? Because it's really, really being uncomfortable with yourself, your team, your organization. It's a deep dive. And that's why, like, my tagline on LinkedIn is aligning what you do with who you are. And this is tying into like reaching your highest potential. You got to dig deep. Like if you want to really, really, really have impact, like if we talk about the individuals that have impact, they're not afraid to go deep. So.
Carolyn or Vera, do you guys have any final thoughts for our show today?
One more thing, and I think we should kind of wrap it up with a game plan or some, action items. But I just want to add that there's a lot of information in turnover. So I would just question, are they doing exit interviews? I would bet that everybody feels like they're actually doing what they need to be doing. But there's frustration. People are leaving. So they don't feel perhaps supported. Have we asked anyone, what do you need for us to be successful? Everybody wants to be on a winning team. They're not winning right now. They're exiting left.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't asked.
That's a really good point, Vera, because if you look at this, I know a few of us on the panel are athletes, right? If you were a soccer team or a basketball team and you kept losing every game, you wouldn't go into every game and be like, let's keep doing exactly what we're doing because we're here to lose. No, we're not. We're here to win. We have a unique team. It's different than the other team. Even if I completely mirror what they're doing, I might fail because that might not match maybe we're a speed team, maybe we're a defensive team. Like I don't know. But if we're not playing into our skills, then we're not optimizing our team. And every single team player, every single one of those 45 employees has something they can bring to the table to help win. But I got to know the game I'm playing and I have to know how to win it. And if I don't know how to win it, and we're not going to all work together to figure out how do we win, then we're probably not ever going to get to the point where people want to be on our team. I mean, it sounds harsh, but it's kind of true, right? If we have that high of an employee turnover, I know I worked for an organization once where I would never send job openings to my friends because I was like, I wouldn't want you to have to work here. Like, it sucks. But that's just not what you want. So
I see that we're at time here. So I think I would just sort of kind of look at like, how do we bring a scorecard together? Because no one wants to be on a losing team. So even if your leading and lagging indicators aren't perfect, put a scorecard together and start using that to drive unity and drive some kind of resolution on these various different topics.
And if those aren't the right numbers after 3 months, be willing to go back and question it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if
Okay.
sales are
Well,
a problem. Go
I
ahead.
told you it was going to be a can of worms, folks. And this is what I think all of us on the panel would actually encourage you, get into these conversations, open up the doors to things where you don't necessarily know the answer. Mr. or Miss or person, CEO, founder who sent us in the business problem, like, get into a conversation with your team, or if you want, get into a conversation with one of us. We're super happy to like come and sit and ask you more questions. But there's lots of space to find opportunities in the questions. And so we talked about this last time too. Ask the questions, right? Create the scorecard, use the scorecard. If the scorecard doesn't work, evolve it, right? There's lots of opportunities. And while it might feel like a very heavy situation right now, I would also say that there's levity in the conversation. So find some peeps that you can get into a good conversation with that can create opportunities in these arena for you. Hopefully we created some of those opportunities for you today. For those of you who are watching who didn't get into the conversation but might be interested in getting into the conversation, we will be here at the same time every week talking about these types of things. So if you have a business problem, we actually have a website where you can submit your business problem and we can talk about it. It's all very like, there are some details, but there's no like business names or people names or anything like that. So you don't have to worry about anything. You just get some brains talking about your problem. And also, if you're a fractional person and you're interested in getting in the conversation, like with your face on the screen, connect with one of us. We have opportunities to broaden the conversation because we just want all of this we want to bring to light the complexity, but also that there's opportunity in the conversation about the complexity. We had a viewer here quickly jumping in right at the end. Very interesting discussion. So thank you for joining us. For those of you who did join us live, if you're joining us on replay, you can feel free to comment as well. We will see those after the fact. Or you can check it out on YouTube. The replay will be available on YouTube. If you're like, oh, I have a friend who needs to hear about this, hit us up on YouTube. We'd be super happy. I think with that, we're done for today. We're over on time.